Okay, looks like it's recording. So did you say that the title is endocrine microbiome or
Yeah, microbial endocrinology.
microbial endocrinology? Okay.
Yep.
Hi everyone. Today I invited Kiran once again after the presentation that we had done probably about a year ago. They got a lot of really great traction. I know many of you have tried Megaspore Probiotics. You got amazing results on that. And so I want to talk a little bit more today. Kiran told me that there is something he wants to talk about, which is a microbial endocrinology. So basically how the microbiome affects our hormones, right? And,
Yep.
and I thought that was absolutely fascinating. So I invited him today to speak with us. Hey, Kiran, you there?
Hi. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you
Everything's
very
clear?
well.
Okay, great.
Yes,
Great.
looks awesome. And I'm in a cabin
It
somewhere out in
looks like it.
Colorado.
I was
So
going to ask you, are you kidnapped? Are you in a holding cell? What's going
no,
on?
yeah, well, yeah, sort of. In many ways, yes. And one of those calls where there's, I just been doing a lot of traveling. There's been a lot of changes in my life, a lot of stress, and definitely my body has been feeling it. So
Yeah.
I've been feeling a little bit under the weather. So today, no makeup, no nothing, but that's okay because it's all about you today.
Very good. Thank you. Yes, and all about your audience, really, and
Yeah.
getting them this information.
Absolutely. And when you talk, nobody's going to see me. So that's the good stuff. All right. So let's dive straight into the content. I just find it really fascinating because that's going to be a big part of my book as well.
Mhm.
And that is the whole element of how does our microbiome really impact our hormones? This is such a fascinating topic. So take it away.
Yeah. So, and it's a totally overlooked area, and when people are dealing with clear hormonal issues, everything from hyperthyroid, hypothyroid, stress, menopause, perimenopause, estrogen imbalances, all the things that women unfortunately have to deal with more often than not. And a lot of times people are focusing on the actual endocrine system within the body, the various glands, the thyroid gland, the adrenal glands, the reproductive glands. And then they're also looking at adaptogens and things that can affect hormone balancing within the body. But one thing that's largely ignored is an entire endocrine system called the microbiome. So the microbiome is now considered to be a virtual organ, if you will. It is as powerful, if not in some respects, more powerful than all your other endocrine glands put together. Your thyroid and your adrenal glands and your the female reproductive organs, all of that. Because what is clear now from all the most recent studies is that the microbiome produces and secretes virtually every hormone that the body utilizes. It also regulates the expression of these hormones, and it can inhibit or enhance the production of certain hormones within the body. So the microbiome plays a central, almost master control role in what happens to hormone balancing within your body. So if you're dealing with hormone imbalances and issues related to hormone imbalances, if you don't address the gut and the microbiome, you really don't get very far. So it becomes an extremely important thing. And we're fortunate enough that now there's a lot of studies to show, what is happening within the gut to affect hormone balancing. So I can give a few examples. For example, most people have heard that serotonin is largely produced in the gut. Right now, it's fairly well understood, and I think a lot of researchers and all that are supporting this data that almost 90% of serotonin is made in the digestive tract. And serotonin is actually a master regulator of the communication between the gut and the brain. Serotonin is known as the happy hormone, of course. It alters mood, but it also alters things like your parasympathetic system, your ability to sleep and relax, gut motility, how well your gut moves, and digestion. So a lot of times indigestion, constipation, all of these things can be a factor of low serotonin levels. And then that can then spiral into mood and sleep issues as well. Serotonin also, like I mentioned, connects the gut and the brain. So a lot of the communication between the gut and the brain is dependent on serotonin. So things like...
Sorry, just to say here, it's like, do you see a lot of people with depression who also happen to have a lot of gut issues?
Yep, it's totally correlated. And a lot of times the depression is preceded by gut issues. And it can be triggered by something as simple as a course of antibiotics. If you have some degree of predisposition for, depression, anxiety, that kind of thing, you could have a singular infection, whether it's a, food poisoning, for example, that can trigger the whole cascade, or even taking a course of antibiotics for, let's say, a sinus infection can disrupt the microbiome enough that it puts you into that downward spiral of low serotonin, low dopamine, thyroid hormone imbalances that start the whole anxiety process. To give you a few other things, so the gut produces things like dopamine. Dopamine, of course, is extremely important for reward centers of the brain, for making you feel happy. If you don't have enough dopamine production, it's very hard to get satisfaction from the things you do. So
Yeah,
the
including
things,
addictions, right? A lot of addictions,
absolutely,
it's due to low dopamine levels.
absolutely, yeah, because it becomes a chemical dependency on that reward, right? So the body requires that chemical reward in order to motivate you to do things that make you happy. For example, going out, playing with your kids, going, shopping, whatever it may be, reading a book. These things, when they make you happy, means that dopamine is programming your body to say, okay, this is a reward behavior. Now, when you become depressed and anxious and dopamine levels go way down, it becomes very hard to get that same reward. That's why nothing sounds good, right? You just want to kind of sit at home and curl up and isolate yourself because thinking about doing anything doesn't sound good. And that's because the dopamine levels are way down and your gut bacteria is responsible for producing that dopamine. At the same time, the gut bacteria also produce things like norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is a stress hormone, right? It triggers the flight or fight response. Same with epinephrine. And interestingly enough, some of the bacteria that produce high levels of norepinephrine and epinephrine in the body are things like E. coli, Salmonella, Campylobacter. These are infective organisms within the gut. So if you have an imbalance of high levels of Salmonella or Pseudomonas or E. coli within the gut, you're getting more production of norepinephrine. You're always in that fight or flight response. And that's where this random feeling of anxiousness comes from. There's no rational thought for it because you're not actually in any danger, right? You wake up in the morning, it's not like you're being chased by murderers or something like that, but you wake up feeling like you are. You wake up just anxious for the day. And that is, in many cases, just because you have an overgrowth of these bacteria.
What about, can we talk a little bit about hormones? What do we know about hormones like progesterone and estrogen and how the microbiome impacts the making and the metabolism of these hormones?
Sure. Let's take estrogen as a great example. So there are basically three forms of estrogen within the body, right? You have estradiol, esterone, and estriol. And of course, they each have different potencies as an estrogenic hormone. Now, what's been shown is that the microbiome actually produces all of them. Not only does your female sex organs produce estrogen, but also the microbiome produces it. But even more fascinating than that is the microbiome, a healthy microbiome, will produce more estriol than any of the other two versions. Now, the benefit of that is estriol was often ignored in medical literature and all that because they found that estriol was the weakest of all of the estrogen hormones, right?
And
so it has the
only present in pregnant women, which now we know that's not true.
Exactly. Yep. And that was the idea was that, okay, it goes down, the high potency estrogens go down in pregnant women, estriol comes up, but it's not true. Your estriol levels are a key to how your body is dealing with estrogen because estriol has this great capability of being weak, meaning it doesn't induce the estrogen dependent cancer issues and imbalance issues. And yet it gives you the benefits of estrogen, like reducing menopausal symptoms, reducing vaginal dryness, and all the good things that estrogen does. Reducing osteoporosis as well. Low levels of estriol are correlated with higher degrees of bone loss. And so what you need is the microbiome to produce more estriol so that you don't end up having an elevation of estradiol or the more potent forms of estrogen. Now, the other part of it is estrobolome. Estrobolome is basically a collection of enzymes that are produced by microbes within the gut that actually break down estrogen and metabolize it so you don't build estrogen too much within your body and end up with an imbalance. Without adequate estrobolome function, you will end up in an estrogen-dependent hormonal dysfunction. And that's one of the main ways that your body clears estrogen is from the use of the microbiome.
Isn't it fascinating that a woman can have a lot of digestive issues and, even if she's eating really well, right? Because there's a lot of people like that. We eat really well, but then our gut is in a mess for whatever reason. I mean, that could be an infection that's there. It could be because of stress levels, right?
Yeah.
Because of lack of, because of antibiotics, whatever it might be the reason, but we're still eating healthy food per se. Isn't it fascinating that that could be the reason why we can be a high risk candidate for breast cancer, for example?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is something that I found it's just so fascinating that to prevent and to really manage, especially if there is history of in the family, is just to take care first and foremost of your gut.
Absolutely. Yep. Take care of the gut. And in fact, there's a lot of research going on right now in breast cancer on how to increase estriol levels, both naturally and of course artificially as well. There've been some studies on using estriol as part of hormone replacement therapy to stimulate or simulate actually what the microbiome should be doing for you in order to reduce your risk of developing estrogen-dependent cancers like breast cancer.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and so really by modulating the microbiome and enhancing the production naturally of estriol through the microbiome, you can mitigate all those issues.
Thanks for sharing. And that's one of the things I talk about in my presentation on Cooking for Balance. It's just how important the estrobolome is. Can you tell us a little bit more about how does Megaspore Probiotic play a role in helping the gut, the microflora, and essentially then helping us with the hormones too?
Sure. And that's a great question. So one of the things people always ask me is, okay, if we know that the microbiome produces these beneficial hormones or suppresses certain hormones that we don't want elevated, then, what are the strains that actually do that and how can we get those into the body? Well, we're not quite there yet. The science is not there. And I don't know if it'll ever be there where we can pick out single strains that do one thing and try to implant it into your gut to enhance that effect. The thing is, we all have the right strains within us. It's a matter of allowing those strains to proliferate. And the way you do that is by reconditioning the gut to favor a bigger diversity of microbes. Now, and that's where the Megaspore comes in. For example, as I mentioned, pathogenic organisms like Salmonella, Pseudomonas, and E. coli, they all will produce higher levels of norepinephrine and epinephrine, right? So those people tend to have a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, which can lead into depression as well. Now, one of the things that Megaspore, the bacteria within Megaspore does is using quorum sensing suppresses the growth of those types of organisms. So it can actually switch the balance to allow those organisms to come down and increase the growth of organisms like Argobacter. Argobacter is really important in producing estradiol, for example. But you can't go and take a supplement of Argobacter. There's no such thing. But you have it in your gut. It's suppressed by these kind of stronger, more pathogenic organisms. So the Megaspore will help recondition the gut to suppress the unfavorable microbes and allow for the regrowth of these underrepresented microbes. The other thing that it does is reduce the inflammation within the gut. And there are some good data that shows that Crohn's disease, colitis, IBD, all these things that are pathologically chronic inflammatory diseases in the gut really show significant disruption in hormone production within the microbiome. Yeah. So if you reduce inflammation, you get a better production and metabolism and regulation of hormone. We know from the latest study that I had mentioned to you earlier that we completed at University of North Texas, the Megaspore probiotic actually reduces inflammation and seals up the gut within the intestinal tract itself, so that you reduce the resulting systemic and local inflammation. So we want to do that to modulate the hormone benefits as well. So it's all about reconditioning.
Is the study published already?
It's being written up for publication right now. It'll be submitted for publication probably in about a month.
Okay.
And it can take anywhere from 1 to 3 months to get published at that point. But it's quite a profound study, because it's the only probiotic study out there in humans that has shown a benefit of a probiotic in sealing up the gut, reducing inflammation, both in the gut and in the circulatory system.
Okay.
Because that's the other thing that affects how hormones travel within your body and communicate with your cell is systemic inflammation. Systemic inflammation really disrupts, especially neuronal hormones that are dependent on the neurons to function. So it can have some real positive benefits in terms of shifting how the microbiome works.
Can we just cover one more condition, and that is there is quite a lot of menopausal women in my group, and so I'm wondering, how does the microbiome and how does probiotics, how would they help somebody who's got who's going through menopause? So obviously low estrogen, right? Very little progesterone, right? Let's talk about that. If there's anything else, because I think what you've mentioned before, to me, that covers menopause as well. But if you feel like there's anything else that you want to add on, then let's do it.
Sure. And really, as you mentioned, progesterone, we didn't talk about that before. Progesterone is another hormone that's produced heavily by the microbiome. And the stimulation of progesterone production by your own glands are actually done by the microbiome as well. So the microbiome both produces it and signals to your body to produce more progesterone as well. So the microbiome reads hormone levels within the body and can trigger and turn on your own glandular systems to produce them. So that is another very important thing in looking at progesterone imbalances. Again, estradiol is one of the best things for menopausal women, and that is very dependent on the microbiome. So both of those are dependent on an increased diversity within the microbiome. Another area. Go ahead. No, I was going to jump to thyroid issues. One of the things that most people don't realize is that a low diversity of microbes is correlated with a high production of thyroid stimulating hormone. So you get hyperthyroidism, right? So they've done a bunch of these studies on animal models. For example, they take mice. They reduce the total microbiome load within the gut of the mice using antibiotics and all that by 25%, 30%. And what you start to see is a huge increase in thyroid stimulating hormone. Now, if you have overproduction of T3, T4, you have, of course, anxiety, depression, jitteriness, unexplained weight loss, all the other issues that go along with it, which can, of course, then lead to hypothyroid because you overwork your thyroid. So then you end up with that fatigue syndrome, and that all comes from just reduced amounts of bacteria within the gut. Let me correlate that to some new data that we're working on with London University. A single dose of 600 milligrams of Augmentin, right? Augmentin is a broad spectrum antibiotic. A single dose reduces the gut microbiome content by 90%.
Wow.
That's a huge decrease, 90%, right? That's a single dose. So a lot of people will take the 5-day pack. You're taking 5 doses of it. So that's how impactful. And then, of course, when your microbe level comes down, your gut will bounce back. But what bounces back makes a difference, right? So what's happening is you bring down your microbial load by 90%. Automatically, you're losing a whole lot of the lactic acid producing bacteria. Now what's happening is because you're not producing lactic acid, the pH in the gut goes up. So now you've got a more alkaline gut. Now, which bacteria do better in an alkaline gut? Well, things like Clostridia, Salmonella, Streptococcus, Staphylococcus, the more pathogenic of organisms and the more unfavorable organisms. So after the antibiotic course, that tends to be what comes up and regrows. Now, when they regrow, they produce less lactic acid. So overall, you're getting this downward spiraling of alkalinizing of the gut and more favorable growth of the types of bacteria you don't want. And so that will then lead to more production of norepinephrine, epinephrine, more thyroid stimulating hormone, all these things that throw off your balance. And so what is really important is if you've ever had a course of antibiotics, or you're going to, or you're on it right now, it becomes extremely important to take a probiotic that can suppress the regrowth of those unfavorable organisms. So one of the things that the bacillus strain does is the bacillus strains in Megaspore have the capability of growing in the presence of antibiotics. And then they produce lactic acid in very high amounts. So even though you're taking an augmentin, for example, you're still keeping the gut at an acid pH, which is really important for the regrowth of the good bacteria.
So in other words,
Then,
what you're saying is when somebody is on antibiotics, it's actually okay to do probiotics, Megaspore at that time too.
yeah, and not only is it okay, it's absolutely important and encouraged.
Yeah.
And we just recently did a study on liver failure patients. We just finished that study. 60 patients. These patients suffer from something called hepatic encephalopathy. That is the swelling of the brain because of high blood ammonia levels, and they die very quickly from this. They are on chronic rifaximin, which is Xifaxan, a really potent antibiotic for the gut. That's the only way they can keep the ammonia levels down, is by keeping the total amount of bacteria down. But of course, that has a whole bunch of side effects. What we were able to show is even in the presence of that antibiotic, adding the spores actually reduced the blood ammonia levels by almost 40% in these patients. So they do work in the presence of antibiotics. They become really important for how your body bounces back after antibiotic therapy.
I know you're also doing a study on Hashimoto's. I don't know how much we can talk about it at this point because it's not concluded yet, right?
Right. Yep.
When is it going to be concluded and for us to know more about it?
I'm thinking in best case scenario, in about 6-7 months, we'll have more and more data rolling through. We're just now in the process of getting the study kind of initiated and started and all that. But I can talk about the reason why we decided to start the study. And the reason why is because we started getting a lot of case reports from a lot of doctors that we work with. We work with roughly 8,000 doctors on a regular basis on Hashimoto's patients, to a point where they're seeing in a few months the Hashimoto's, the thyroid antibodies going away to a point of being undetected. One of the biggest problems with Hashimoto's is all the comorbidities that people suffer from, right? The thyroid portion is one of it, but of course, all the other symptoms that people deal with that really affects quality of life is the biggest impact of the disease. And seeing the huge changes in those symptomologies, things like the fatigue, the brain fog, the depression, the anxiety, all of those things being improved quite significantly after about 2-3 months on the product in a noticeable way. So because of all that feedback, we decided, okay, it makes sense to invest in a larger scale study on Hashimoto's itself, and that's why we initiated the study. So we feel really good about it. We feel that we're going to see some really positive things in the study, and it'll be the first probiotic study on Hashimoto's that we know of.
Awesome. So definitely when it's out, we're going to do another video and share the results. And because there's so many women who have Hashimoto's, and my antibodies are still elevated. Like I'm at 66.
Oh, are you? Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Even though I used to be like close to 2000. So, it's
wow.
a improvement to 2000 down to 66. But
yeah, it's huge.
I would love to see them going down even further. Awesome. Well, thank you. This was, as always.
You're welcome.
And there's a couple of reference studies I'm going to ask you for, and I'm going to post the links down below. And for those of you who want to give Megaspore Probiotics a try, and there's going to be a link below this video. But also, there's always a lot of questions we get about how do I use it, when do I use it, and all that. And so the FAQs are going to be down below the video as well, so we don't have to talk about it on this call here. Awesome. Thank you so much, as always.
You're welcome. Thank you for letting me do this. I think this is such an important topic that women really need to understand, so they don't ignore an entire system of the body that is really the master regulator of hormones. So really take care of your gut, improve the diversity. That's really the key.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so that's video 1. That's great. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So how long was that? I didn't look at the timing.
About 30 minutes.
Oh, okay, good.
Perfect. Yeah. And the question here for you, do you, would you be able to dig out some studies for me that I can put in my book on, and I'm going to totally reference you and all that in the book, my book.
Yeah.
about the fact, because this is new to me, I never knew this, that partly that estrogen and progesterone are partly produced in the gut as well. Like,
Hmm.
I've always known about obviously the ovaries in women, and then when the ovaries are removed, it's kind of fascinating. I don't know if you know this, adrenals can step in and
Yeah.
compensate in producing estrogen and progesterone in postmenopausal women. And and I've had clients who are not who lost their ovaries due to cancer and uterus, and they have been taking no meds whatsoever, no hormones,
Hmm.
and but it was only possible when they really took care of their adrenals, and the adrenals
Yeah.
basically compensate. But I didn't know about the gut. Is this something that you can send me a couple of links to studies to show that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'll send you a number of studies that I use and reference for microbial hormone control, including estrogen. So
Okay.
I'll send you a little packet of studies.
Okay. All right, cool. So for the K2, do you have slides?
Um, I do have a lot of K2 slides. If you want me to use some, um,
What would you rather do? Like, are there slides that, show something that do they need any visual representation for people to grasp the concept, or no?
probably not. I think we could probably talk about it, and then how do you share slides with Zoom?
There is a way to do that. Just look at the down below the page. I'm on my phone, so
Oh, share screen. Okay, I
yeah,
see.
share screen. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Let me bring up my K2 presentation, and then if it seems
I
appropriate.
would pass up on things like bullet points. Like if you're talking through stuff and having bullet points, that probably no. But
Right,
if you're showing something that's very visual, like for example, for Megaspore Probiotics, you had the slide that was showing different parts of the intestines where the
right.
bacteria lives. I think stuff like that carry a lot of value.
Okay. Let me see if there's any figures in here that would be important. Yeah, I think for the most part I could talk about it, but I'll have my presentation here available in case I need to pop it up for some reason.
Okay.
But we can. I could just kind of give a summary. I mean, the whole purpose with the K2 for me is just kind of getting the message across that it's arguably the most important supplement to take, both for men and women, and I can just kind of outline what it does in the body, all the different things that it impacts, and where we get it, in the natural world. Do we get it from our diet? What are the deficiency levels within the Western population, European population, and so on? So we really kind of put across the importance of having it in your body.
Okay.
That's really the point of it, and we could talk about its impact on bones, on cardiovascular system, on your brain, your neurons, energy levels, and then aging as well. I'm guessing anti-aging is also an important topic, right?
Right. Okay. All right. Let's do that.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. This is Magdalena here from Hormones Balance. Today, I'm here with Kiran from Megaspore Probiotics. Many of you have already seen him and I do calls together, videos together, talking about the microbiome. I have a lot of respect for Megaspore Probiotics as a company, just because it really works and it has made such a profound difference in my own life and the lives of many people in our community. And so I'll post the link down below here if you want to watch the previous videos on just introducing Megaspore Probiotics. So when Kiran said that they have another product that's just come out and that's really important, it's overlooked in a very big way and underestimated. I obviously jumped on it and I wanted to talk to him about it so we all benefit from that knowledge, and perhaps try the new product as well. Kiran, welcome as always.
Hi, thank you. Good to be with you again.
All right, so what's the big deal about K2? I mean, something that we kind of hear even in the nutrition world,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be very honest with you. It's not something that I know a lot about. I mean, I know that it's hard to get it from real food. I think we all know that vitamin D needs K2 to
Mm-hmm.
be absorbed, right? And that's all I know. So
Yeah, and and you're
embarrassing
not
me, but that's what you
and
hear.
yeah, and you're not alone in that. I mean, a lot of people who are extremely knowledgeable in physiology, anatomy, and nutrition still don't know too much about K2. It's still kind of catching on, but that's not to say that there aren't enough studies. I mean, there are some massive studies on vitamin K2. Some of the largest nutritional studies. We're talking about 98,000 patient studies, 18,000 patient studies, 39,000 patient studies. So there's some amazing amount of science behind vitamin K2. It's just a matter of the public and the professionals catching on to it. But the reason why we wanted to do vitamin K2 and the way we've set up our company is we're only going to do things that we feel are absolutely necessary and nobody is really doing correctly. And I've been working with vitamin K2 both on the research end and the product end for the last about 15 years. And I just haven't seen a lot of companies put out a proper vitamin K2 product with the right potency, stability, and all that. And so we felt that it was absolutely necessary because it's arguably the most important vitamin to take. And I'll explain why. So vitamin K2 is different from K1. Most people are familiar with vitamin K1. That's the version of vitamin K that you find in leafy green vegetables. So you get a lot of that in spinach and kale and things like that, which is good. And you need K1 because what K1 does is it functions in the liver to help your body produce blood clots. If you don't have enough vitamin K1, you're going to bleed out from bumping into a desk or your gums bleed, and it can cause some real severe problems. Vitamin K2 is a different version of vitamin K. It's the version that leaves the liver. So the technical term for that is called extrahepatic. So they call it the extrahepatic form of vitamin K. It functions in all the other parts of the body outside of the liver. Now, what's interesting is there have been almost 20 different vitamin K dependent proteins that have been discovered in the rest of the body. And these are proteins that your body secretes, but secretes in an inactive form. And they need to be activated by vitamin K, or K2 in this case, in order for them to function. Some of the most well-known ones is a protein called osteocalcin. It's the protein that's released by cells that make bone within your body, right? So these are called osteoblastic cells. They release osteocalcin. Osteocalcin's job is to take calcium and stick it on the bone, literally stick it on the bone to form the bone. Without osteocalcin being activated by vitamin K2, you can't build bone. It stops there. The process stops there. Now, vitamin D helps osteoporosis because what vitamin D does is it stimulates those bone building cells to release osteocalcin. So what vitamin D does is now causes a big increase in osteocalcin. So you have all these proteins floating around waiting to build bone, but unless K2 comes along and activates them, they don't build a bone. So,
Sorry, question. So, can we
mhm.
get K2 from real food?
Yes. So the places where you get vitamin K2 are unfortunately things that we don't consume anymore that effectively. Number one is organ meat. So eating higher amounts of organ meat of animals, you'll get a decent amount of vitamin K2 in the diet, which I haven't eaten organ meat in a long time myself. And I don't know a lot of people that do. The other thing is certain types of fermented foods like natto, the fermented soybeans out of Japan, which is like eating old socks, and so people don't eat a lot of natto. Even in Japan, in Western Japan, nobody eats natto. In Eastern Japan, everybody eats natto. And in fact, they've done epidemiological studies to compare the health of those two regions of Japan. Eastern Japan natto people have far less incidence of cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, senile dementia compared to Western Japan. In Europe, European people, especially in Northern Europe, do benefit from certain fermented cheeses. So in Norway, Sweden, where they have fermented cheeses, those do have some decent content of vitamin K2 in there. But outside of organ meat, those Northern European fermented cheeses and natto, you really don't get any K2 in your diet. In fact, a study published in 2012 showed that Westerners in both Europe and in the US are all clinically deficient in vitamin K2. So we are all walking around totally clinically deficient in this absolutely critical vitamin.
Wow.
You know, so it's an epidemic. It really is, and it correlates with the increased incidence rate of osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, senile dementia, all of those things. The more deficiency in K2 you find, the higher incidence rate of those issues. You know, so we talked about bone health, so it's absolutely necessary for building bone. The other thing it does is removes calcium from the arteries and soft tissue. So when you take calcium, whether it's from meals or supplements, calcium is just, you know, an inert, it's a rock, if you will, right? So it just kind of floats around the body. And if your body is not directing it as to where to go, it just settles into your soft tissue. One of the areas it loves to settle into is your arteries. That's how the arteries become calcified and harden. You get low circulation, poor perfusion of your organ systems and your muscles. And so what happens is there's a protein called MGP, which is the only protein in the body that has been found to actually remove calcium from soft tissue. And that is removing it from your arteries. That protein is also vitamin K2 dependent. It's the only way that protein functions is to be turned on by vitamin K2. And so it then can remove calcium out of your soft tissue. There's indications that there are similar proteins in other parts of the body, for example, your skin. The function of collagen and elastin, those are the proteins that keep your skin tight and flat without the wrinkles. Those collagen and elastin over time become calcified. And when they become calcified, they lose their tensile strength, so they start to dip. The dipping is the wrinkles that you see in the skin because your skin can't bounce back from smiling and frowning or whatever it is, you know, however your mood is. And so vitamin K2 plays a very important role in removing the calcium out of the collagen and elastin. So it actually keeps your skin looking healthier for longer.
So you're saying that actually we can see people, their wrinkles go, women seeing their wrinkles go away by taking K2?
Yeah, diminished to some degree, and then even slowing down the progression of wrinkle formation.
Wow.
Because calcification of soft tissue is a big part of aging. That's what happens to our muscles, our skin, our arteries, our neurons. All these things end up dysfunctional because they start to die off and their function gets disrupted by the calcification. Vitamin K2 comes along and cleans that stuff out so that your body functions better. So heart disease, osteoporosis, the brain. If you look at the body biologically, the highest concentration of vitamin K2 in the body is actually in the brain. And the brain requires vitamin K2 for function in order for the nerve cells to communicate with each other, for memory cells to function better. So when you have really low amounts of vitamin K2 intake, you have a much higher risk of dementia. And so you start getting more of the brain fog, the losing the memory, you know, the short-term memory loss, things like that. And so in Japan, doctors actually prescribe the natto food that is very high in vitamin K2 concentration for senile dementia. So they actually prescribe it to alleviate the issue. So if you're getting older and you're, you know, over 40 and your body starts to decline, you want to get the vitamin K2 in there to keep your brain sharp and keep it functioning the way it should.
Awesome. So you mentioned that the reason you guys go into products that other companies don't do well or don't do at all. So what's the difference between your K2 versus, I mean, I've seen K2 products out there in the market, even over the counter. So what's the difference?
So there's a lot of K2 products. The biggest difference are threefold, actually. The first thing is the dose. So most companies will put about 45 to 90 micrograms of K2 in a product as a daily dose. Now it's a good amount, meaning it's better to get 45 to 90 micrograms than no K2 at all. But the pharmacokinetic studies have shown that 320 micrograms is the ideal dose for vitamin K2 to get all of the benefits from vitamin K2. Right? So there's no reason in my mind to not take anything less than 320 micrograms, especially since we're not getting it in our food. But most companies won't put that in because the cost of it is too much. Now we have a interesting position because we manufacture the vitamin K2 ourselves. So we have much lower cost. So we can actually put 320 micrograms into a product at a very, very affordable cost that you can't find anywhere else. Any other company putting 320 micrograms in their product would cost twice what our product does. So that's the first thing, is the dose. The second part is stability. Vitamin K2 is inherently a very unstable molecule. It reacts to things like light, moisture, other things. When you mix it with magnesium and other things, it starts to react, and so it gets degraded. Very few companies are doing the extensive stability studies that are required to prove that your vitamin K2 is actually functional. So we have done a number of extensive studies. One of the reasons, because we produce our natural vitamin K2 as a prescription drug. In India and Southeast Asia and other countries where we sell it, we actually sell it as a prescription drug. So we have to have those extensive studies. And so we have guaranteed stable vitamin K2 product. The last part is the cofactors. So vitamin K2 requires certain cofactors in order to function optimally. The main cofactors are magnesium, zinc, and boron. Without adequate magnesium, zinc, and boron, you might have enough vitamin K2 in the body, but it's not functioning because you don't have the cofactors. So, and a lot of people are quite deficient in boron and zinc, things like that. So we've added the right amount of boron, zinc, and magnesium that supports the 320 micrograms of K2. So we've taken that part of it, that guesswork, that issue out of the product completely, so that you don't have to think about it. The other thing is we've added K1. A lot of people don't get enough K1. If you don't get enough K1, the one that functions in the liver, what the liver does is it sequesters K2. So it doesn't allow your body to release K2 because it's saying, oh no, the liver needs it, we're not going to let it go. So if you give the body adequate K1, all the K2 that you're taking goes into the other tissue. Wow. So those are the three most important things, and there's not another product out there that has all three of those factors.
Awesome. And what other, do we have any precautions? Anybody lactating, pregnant women, people on chemo, anybody who should not be taking the K2?
The only precaution that we advise people is people who are on Coumadin or warfarin blood thinners. If you're on those blood thinner therapies, you want to talk to your doctor about it, because your doctors will tell you that vitamin K is a contraindication for blood thinners. And it can be, but in many ways it can actually help the blood thinner therapy. So if you are on Coumadin or warfarin blood thinners, and you talk to your doctor, you might want to measure things like your PT-INR and all that. Other than that, there's no reason for anybody else not to take K2, especially when you're pregnant. Nursing, if you're thinking about getting pregnant, you want to strengthen your bones, your arteries, increase your mitochondrial efficiency, and reduce aging. One more thing to mention is vitamin K2 is probably the most important anti-aging nutrient you can find. Besides the wrinkles that we talked about already, one big factor of aging is the dying off of your mitochondria. So what happens is the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right? It's the engine of the cell that drives energy production. What happens as you age is the amount of mitochondria within each cell starts to decline, and the function of the mitochondria starts to decline as well. So then your tissue slowly starts to die, whether it's your skeletal muscle tissue, your smooth muscle tissue, your neurons, all these things start to atrophy. That's why you become weak, you have low energy, and your nerves don't function the same way. Vitamin K2 actually rescues your body from dysfunctional mitochondria. It can jumpstart the engine of your cells. It increases the amount of energy your mitochondria produces. So we're actually seeing a reversing of rapid age decline.
Interesting. Is there a way to measure K2?
Unfortunately, there isn't a standardized assay for vitamin K2. You can measure vitamin K2 dependent proteins to kind of get an idea of what's happening with your vitamin K2 status in the body. The main one is osteocalcin. So labs like US Labs and LabCorp offer a osteocalcin test. What they're measuring is an undercarboxylated osteocalcin versus carboxylated. So carboxylated is the active form, undercarboxylated is the inactive form. So they're measuring the ratio of the two. If you have higher inactive form, of course, your vitamin K levels tend to be really low in the body versus more higher active form. But if you live in the Western world and you're not eating your organ meat every day, you're not eating natto, or you're not eating fermented cheeses in Northern Europe, you are clinically deficient vitamin K2.
So
no doubt about it.
How soon would let's just say somebody's most definitely K2 deficient. Mm-hmm. How soon would they start feeling the difference in how they feel by taking your K2?
The megaquinone. So the megaquinone with 320 micrograms is a really good potent dose of K2. Within the first 2 weeks of starting it, they'll feel certain things. Some of the things you feel, of course, you can't feel your arteries clearing up as well. You can't feel your bones being built. But the things you will feel is you'll notice that your hair and nails start to grow faster and stronger. That is something that people reported to us all the time. In fact, to a point where we ended up filing a patent on it. You'll notice a difference in your energy levels. You'll notice a difference in your sleep levels. One of the things that vitamin K2 does is upregulate the parasympathetic. And so it balances the sympathetic and parasympathetic. So a lot of people report to us that they're sleeping much better now that they have vitamin K2. Now, because the powerhouse of your cells, the mitochondria, are working at higher efficiency, you end up with more energy, more alertness, more cognitive function. You'll notice that as a difference as well. Then, of course, down the road, you can measure things like your bone mineralization levels, high-speed CT for calcium score in the arteries. Those things you can see are improving the rest of your body systems, but you will feel an energy, a cognitive, a sleep difference within the first couple of weeks. And look at your skin, too. A lot of people feel there's something called thinning of the skin, right? As you age, your skin looks more thinner, meaning it doesn't look like it's glowing as much, doesn't look full. We've actually done case studies where we look at women who report seeing increased thickness of the skin, improvement of the wrinkles, the tone of the skin, and then of course the hair, skin, and nails too that I talked about.
I assume you must be taking your K2 because your skin is just like flawless.
I'm taking a lot of it, and I just turned 40. Which is, a month ago. So I'm hoping to continue to take it. So when I'm 50, I still feel like I'm 28, like I do right now. So absolutely makes a big difference in the appearance of your skin.
Awesome.
And the other thing is hyperpigmentation. That's another thing we found. We did an actual study on this with 20 patients who reported a high degree of hyperpigmentation in the skin. A lot of people get hyperpigmentation as they age. You get the little age spots. That seems to be reduced dramatically with high intakes of K2.
Awesome. Well, I just got the bottles from you guys, so I'm gonna definitely give it a try and then report 2 weeks from now. How different does it feel?
Yeah, you'll be bouncing around back there.
Oh, I need that right now. Thank you so much. This was awesome. As
You're
always,
welcome.
is there any new products that's in the pipeline that you're okay to talk about?
Actually, there's a couple other things that we felt a great need for. One of them is a really effective candida product.
Oh, wow.
So we're actually making a new product that's going to be an anti-candida product. It'll have a multitude of functions. The one candida product that I always recommend people use right now is a product called SF722, which is a undeciclinic acid product. It's very effective at reducing candida, but it's still missing a couple of features. One is it does get rid of candida, but at the same time, you also have to address the biofilm issue and the microbe issue, because when a lot of times candida is hiding within biofilms of staphylococcus and all that. So you have to be able to break down the biofilms and get to the bad bacteria to alleviate the candida. So we're addressing that by utilizing some new compounds, one of which that I'm very excited about is ozonated coconut oil.
Oh, wow.
And it's a totally new thing. So ozonated coconut oil has great potency at breaking up biofilms, killing off bad bacteria associated with candida. So then it's a 2-in-1 approach where we're going after the bad bacteria that's supporting candida growth, and we're going after the candida as well. Now, at the same time, at the same time, we also have to take care of non-candida fungus that also can grow opportunistically once we eliminate candida. And so we're adding propolis into the product to help take care of that as well. So it's a more comprehensive product for people that deal with yeast overgrowth.
Oh my God, I can't tell you. This is going to be probably even bigger than Megaspore Probiotics for the community, because probably about 80% of women, 70 to 80% of women I work with have problems with candida. Many of them don't
Absolutely.
So spot on.
Yeah, you're totally right. And again, that's why we see the need for it, because we're looking to recommend products out there, but we just can't find one that addresses everything the way it should be addressed. And so it's another need that we're going to fulfill.
Yeah, I love it how you just how you create products based on what's missing and filling in the gaps. It's really awesome. A real innovator and progressive mind. I love that.
Thank you. And we do, and then we'll do research on it too. That's what we want to do. We do a
Yeah,
lot of
well, and
clinical
if you
studies.
need any candidates for being part of your research,
We know where to find you. You're in Colorado now, right?
yeah, well, not just me, but I mean, my community, I'm sure there's a lot of
Absolutely.
women who will volunteer. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We should definitely talk about that, especially when we get to the Candida product. We would love to get. We could even do kind of an open label study. It's not double blind crossover, but open label studies with a large enough population actually gives you some really good data. So we're happy to send out the product free to your people, and then they just have to report back what's happening.
Awesome. Let's be in touch on that
Yeah.
one. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, let me just turn off the recording
Okay.
because that takes up a lot of space. More. Stop recording.